Hey guys, and welcome back to Lesson 1, Part 2 of Adding and Subtracting Decimals and Estimation. In today's lesson, we're just going to be focusing on rounding, and we're going to spend a lot of time in next class on just rounding and rounding games, because rounding is super important in all of our math and science classes this year and in the future. That's including after high school, so we want to make sure that we've really got it. Rounding is essentially a way to rewrite a number so that it's easier to understand and easier to add. But we still want to keep it close to its original number so that we're not too far off. So this is actually less exact than calculating, but it's more exact than the front-end estimation we learned in the last lesson. We're going to round to the place indicated in the question. So the question is going to tell you to round to the nearest tenths, ones, tens, hundreds, one of those. And you're going to underline or circle that digit. Then look to the number directly to the right, and if the number on the right is 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, the underlined digit is going to stay the same. It's going to not change. And all the numbers after this digit are going to turn into a 0. If the number on the right is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, though, then the underlined digit is going to go up by 1. So it's going to increase by 1. And same thing, every number to the right of that is again going to turn into a 0. I've got this little rhyme or rap here. It doesn't really rhyme very well, I'm sorry, but I did piece it together from things that I've heard in the past and other places online, and we're going to use this in class to help us to remember the different steps. But for right now, we're just going to go through an example together. In this question, it says round each number to the nearest 10 and then add up. We've got 3 different numbers here, and the tens column can be different in each one, so we want to make sure to treat them each differently. In 87.85, our 8 is in the tens column. This is not front-end estimation though, so remember we can't just take the 8 and turn everything else to 0. We need to underline the 8 and look at the number to the right of it. And that's a 7. So before, in the lesson, it said anything that's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, our underlined digit is going to increase by 1. So this 8 is going to become a 9. Everything after the 9, so everything after to the right of it, is going to turn into a 0. So that 7 becomes a 0. Then we have the decimal, 0, 0. So that part's kind of similar to our front-end estimation. In our second number, 14.60, our tens is the 1. And we look to the number to the right of the 1 to see if our 1 is going to stay the same, stay a 1, or go up by 1, become a 2. Since the number to the right of it is a 4, that falls into the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 category, which means that it's not going to change. The 1 stays the same. But our 4, as well as the 6 and 0, all become zeros, so that rounds to 10. For our last number, 734.3, our tens column is in a different place. So don't be tricked, it's not the 7. Our tens is actually this 3 here. And when we look to the right of the 3, it's a 4. The 4 tells us that the 3 is going to stay the same. But our 7 is in front of the 3, which means that we need to keep it. 7, nothing happens to it. Then the 3 stays the same because the 4 beside it told us that it is not going to change. The 4 becomes a 0 because it's after to the right of our underlined digit. Then decimal, 0, because the 3 is also to the right of our underlined digit. Now that we've got all of it rounded, we can rewrite this so that we can add it properly. 90.00. And remember, when we're adding with decimals, we want to line up the decimals. So in our next one, our 10 will line up here. And in the last one, their decimal there, the 7 is all the way on the outside. Then we're going to add. 0, 0, 0 is 0, 0, 0, 0 is 0, Then we have our decimal places because they all line up. 0, 0, 0 is 0. 9 plus 1 is 10 plus 3 is 13. And 1 plus 7 is 8. So our final estimation using rounding is 830. You may have noticed that this is the same question that we did in the last video, but in the last video we're using front-end estimation. So in our last video, we got 790 as our estimation. 830 is what we got using the same numbers, but estimating them in a different way, estimating them using rounding. And later on in this lesson, we're going to calculate and see what the real answer is, so that we can see if our front-end estimation or rounding estimation was more accurate. We've got a now you try section here. We're going to round each number to the nearest 10 just like we did, and then add them together. So pause the video now, and I'll give you the answer afterwards. I'm about to give you the answer, so if you haven't had a chance to pause and try it, pause now. The answer that you should get when rounding each to the nearest 10 is 210. If you didn't get this number, be sure to ask me at the beginning of next class. One part that we might have got confused with is this number, is there isn't anything in the tens column. Remember that if there is nothing, that's just a 0. So this is kind of like writing 0.7 If I look at the number in the tens column, which is the 0, and look to the number to the right, which is a 7, the 7 says the 0 has to go up by 1, which is how we would get 10 in this place instead of 0 or 7. Hopefully that helped. We have another now you try section here next, and this is practicing just rounding to different places. The tens, the hundred, the tenth, the thousand, the hundredth. Remember that you got a sheet in our review that told you each of these place values, but if you forget, you can always look them up online to give yourself a little hint. In the second section, you're going to round each number to the nearest 100 and then solve. So there's some tricky ones in there. Make sure to ask questions if you have them, and we'll take them up in class. So you can pause the video now to do those now you tries, and we'll move on to the calculate. Oop. We've now tried both of the estimation techniques. Now we're going to calculate, and in calculating, we're solving for the real answer without estimation. We can use a calculator to calculate, but you also need to know how to add and subtract decimals without using a calculator, so that's what we're going to do in this lesson here. Using the same example we completed together above. I find it easier to add two numbers at a time, so I'm going to add the first two together and then add them to 734.3. If you're confident with your adding, you can add all three at the exact same time. Just leaves a little bit more room for error. 87.85. Make sure that our decimal places line up when we put the 14.60 in there. This is all addition. Sometimes these signs can be different. We'll be learning about that later on in the unit, but in this one it's all addition. Always adding from right to left. So 5 plus 0 is 5. 8 plus 6 is 14. 7 plus 1 is 8. Plus 4 is 12. 1 plus 8 plus 1 is 10. Like that. So our final answer is 102.45. Now we have to add that number to 734. So I'll rewrite the 102.45 over here since I'm running out of room. You might not have though. And then I'm going to line up my decimal places, 734.3. This one only has one digit after the decimal place, whereas the 102.45 have two. That just means that underneath the 5 there is a secret 0. We're going to add these together right to left. 5 plus 0 is 5. 4 plus 3, 7. Then we've got our decimal places because we line them up nicely. 2 plus 4 is 6. 0 plus 3 is 3. And 1 plus 7 is 8. So our final answer is 836.75. The question below asks, is this answer close to your estimates? So as a reminder, for our other estimates, For front end, we got 790. And for rounding, we got 830. So is this answer close to our estimates? Yes. But notice that rounding is more accurate or closer to than front end. And we'll discuss this a little bit more in class, but in front end rounding, we're ignoring all the ones after the digit that is in the very front. Whereas with rounding, we're taking into account the next place value to the right. So rounding is more accurate. But still, both of them are pretty close. This one says now you try, but we're actually going to try this one together, and then you're going to do the second one as a now you try. So the first, where should the decimal go in the number below? Use both estimation techniques below to find out. 423.6 minus 107.2 is equal to 31640, and we're trying to estimate where that decimal place is going to go. So we know that's the number, we just don't know if the decimal place is in between the 3 and the 1 and the 6, the 6 and the 4, the 4 and the 0, who knows? So we're going to use our estimation to find out. In front-end estimation, a reminder that we're taking the front number and turning everything else into a 0. So in our first number, the 4 is in the front, the 2 is going to turn to a 0, the 3 will turn to a 0, we have a decimal, and the 6 turns to a 0. Then we're going to subtract, and I'm just going to do these vertically to save us some time here. We're going to subtract the second one, and in our second one, the front number is 1, so we write that down, not caring about what comes after it. 0 becomes 0, 7 becomes a 0, decimal, 2 becomes a 0. Then I subtract 0 minus 0, decimal place, 0 minus 0, 0 minus 0, 4 minus 1 is 3. So our final estimation there is 300. For rounding, it tells us to round to the nearest 100. It just so happens that both of these, the nearest 100, is going to be the 4 and the 1 again. So if I look at the 4 as our nearest 100 and check out its neighbor to the right, which is the 2 says the 4 is going to stay the same, so it doesn't change. But everything after that 4, which is the nearest 100, is going to turn into a 0. For our second number, the 1 looks to the right at the 0. The 0 also tells the 1 that it's going to stay the same, so it's not going to change. 1, and everything after our 100 column, which is our 1, will turn to a 0. So we end up with the exact same question, or same answer, as when we did front end. 0 minus 0, 0 minus 0, 0 minus 0, and 4 minus 1, which is 3. So in both of our estimations, we got 300. This will mean that when we go to our final answer, we want to place the decimal place so that the number turns into something close to 300. If I was to put my decimal after the 3, then this number would read 3.1640, which is not close to 300. If I was to put it after the 1, this would make it 31.64, which is also, it's closer to 300, but it's still not as close as we can get, so we'll erase that. Next option is right here, 316.4. That value is only 16 different from our estimations, so this is probably the answer. I'm just going to show you what it looks like after the 4, so that we always confirm. This one reads 3,164, which is much further away from 300 than it was when we had our decimal between the 6 and the 4. So our final answer, we're going to put the decimal between the 6 and the 4, like that. So now you guys have an opportunity to try out that type of question right here, and we'll do some more in class with a different number. The only difference with this is that you have 3 numbers to add together instead of just the 2. So if you want, you can do 2 at a time and go from there. At the very end of the lesson, there's just a reminder, same as we did for last class. You have an entry quiz at the start of our next math class together, and it's going to include questions that are similar to the Now You Try section questions. There's always going to be an opportunity before that entry quiz to ask questions and to review some of the material, just in case there was something that was unclear. But if this lesson wasn't enough, or you find that you need more practice, in the video description or in our Google Classroom, you'll find extra links to help you practice more. Have a good night. We will see you tomorrow.